Hello everyone, I'm Domashych. I'm a mobile development expert specializing in cross-platform frameworks like Xamarin and Flutter. I'm also a Google developer expert in Dart and Flutter. Currently, I work as a senior mobile engineer at TeamGo. And today, I'm excited about this technology, Flutter. As you might have guessed from the talk title, we are going to address several specific questions. What Flutter is, why you should consider it as a technology choice in your company, or why not, how you can start incorporating it into your projects, and look at the companies where it is already successfully applied. But first, I'd like you to meet Dash. Dash is a mascot for the Flutter framework and the Dart, which is used in Flutter development. Today, Dash will show us some style and will help me answer these questions. Oh, and just in case if it wasn't clear from the first glance, Dash is a hummingbird. So let's start from the beginning. What is Flutter? According to the Flutter Dev website, Flutter is Google's UI toolkit for building beautiful, natively compiled applications for mobile, web, desktop, and embedded devices from a single code base. What does it mean? Flutter SDK is a modern React-style framework, which includes a rich set of UI components implementing material design and iOS Cupertino styles, and heavily optimized mobile-first 2D rendering engine. To the underlying operating system, Flutter applications are packaged in the same way as any other native application. They are compiled to 32-bit and 64-bit ARM machine code for iOS and Android, JavaScript for the web, and Intel x64 for desktop devices. Flutter apps run on this variety of platforms with little or no change to a single code base using a single programming language, Dart. And finally, Flutter is a Google's product, although Google is not the only one contributing to it. What makes Flutter so special? And if Flutter is a cross-platform framework, then how can it offer a comparable to native apps performance? Well, cross-platform frameworks typically work by creating an abstraction layer over the underlying native UI libraries, struggling to work around inconsistencies of each platform representation. App code is written in one language, which then interacts with the native system libraries written with another language to display UI. This adds an overhead when there is a lot of interaction between UI and the app logic. By contrast, Flutter minimizes those abstractions by passing the system UI widget libraries in favor of its own widget set. This approach has several benefits. It avoids a significant performance bottleneck by allowing Flutter to composite the entire scene at once, without transitioning back and forth between Flutter code and the platform code. It decouples the application behavior from any operating system dependencies. The application looks and feels the same on all versions of the operating system, even if it changed the implementation of its controls. And it provides unlimited extensibility. This way, designers and developers can create expressive and flexible UI where nothing limits their imagination. I hope it's now clear and how it is unique. And we are now ready to move on to our next question. Why you should consider it as a technology choice in your company? Well, I have at least 5 reasons for you. Flutter allows building beautiful UI. As I mentioned, Flutter has its own implementations of each UI control, rather than using those provided by the system. For example, there is a pure Dart implementation of both the iOS switch control and the Android equivalent. And actually, any variant of the switch control can be created, as developers are not limited to the extension points provided by the operating system. At the same time, Flutter has platform-specific adaptations where it is required, like scrolling physics, text editing, typography, or page navigation. Flutter is fast. It is architected to support glitch-free, jank-free graphics at the native speed of the device. It is powered by Skia, the same hardware-accelerated 2D graphics library that supports Chrome and Android. The Dart code that paints Flutter visuals is compiled into native code, which uses Skia for rendering. As I've explained previously, Flutter user interfaces are built, laid out, composited, and painted by Flutter itself. Flutter performs one layout operation per frame. During layout, the only information that flows from parent to child are the constraints. And the only information that flows from child to parent is the geometry. This way, layout algorithm works in the single pass. There are also optimizations aiming to process only the part of the screen that needs it, ensuring that only dirty UI elements and a limited part of the subtree around them are visited during layout. Flutter is portable. Traditionally, when building apps, the first decision you have to make is where my app is going to run. With Flutter, you can start with the experience you want to create, and then ship it to any device you want to target. Here is how it is achieved. This is a simplified schema of Flutter architectural layers. Typically, developers interact with Flutter framework. It is a reactive UI framework providing a rich set of widgets, layouts, and foundational libraries. Flutter engine is a core which supports lowest-level primitives necessary for all Flutter applications, including input, graphics, text rendering subsystems. The engine is platform agnostic, presenting a stable application binary interface that provides a platform embedder with a way to set up and use Flutter. And finally, the platform embedder is a native OS application that acts as a glue between Flutter and the host operating system. Flutter SDK already includes platform embedders for Android, iOS, Windows, macOS, and Linux. And it's also possible to create a custom platform embedder, like Toyota did for their car's infotainment system. Also, using the embedder, Flutter code can be integrated into an existing native mobile application with a feature called Add to App. Flutter is productive. One of the Flutter's main advantages is that it saves engineering resources by letting developers create apps for all these platforms with the same code base. Also, Flutter development experience is great. The majority of the Flutter framework itself is built with the same language that we, as users, work with, Dart. So there is no need for switching when you want to check out the framework or the widgets implementation. Flutter offers stateful hot reload for mobile and desktop applications, allowing developers to make changes to the code and see the results instantly, without needing a full recompile, restart app, or losing its state. This means developers can quickly iterate on a screen deeply nested in the app, without starting from the home screen after every reload. Flutter comes with visual, behavioral, and motion-rich widgets implementing material design guidelines as Cupertino styles, so designers and Flutter developers can speak the same language. And finally, Flutter is open-sourced. While Google is the primary contributor, a broader ecosystem grows around Flutter. Toyota, Canonical, Sony, Samsung, Microsoft Surface team are contributing to a greater user experience on their platforms and devices. Flutter has a massive community support, with thousands of contributors adding to the core framework, and extended the packages ecosystem. There are now over 15,000 packages for Flutter and Dart from big companies like Amazon, Adobe, Huawei, Alibaba, eBay, and Square, individual developers. To recap, Flutter is beautiful, fast, portable, productive, and open source. I hope I have managed to wake up some curiosity to the framework, and you'll add Flutter to the list of options for your next project. Or will consider it as a technology choice for the next iteration of an existing product. Now, a few words on why you may want to choose another framework. For example, not every web page would make sense in Flutter. It is perfectly suited for app-centric experiences, like progressive web apps. Search engine optimized pages, like blogging platforms, is not a strong Flutter's point, for now. Or if you are building a deeply immersive augmented reality experience. I'm not saying it is impossible in Flutter, but using it won't be as beneficial as for other products. Also, you should look at your current team experience and strengths. If it makes more sense to requalify them for another cross-platform framework, go for it. All right, moving on to the next question for today. How exactly it is done? Flutter development can be done on any operating system. Flutter SDK comes with command-line tools, which allows development of Flutter apps in any text editor. But of course, having syntax highlights and code completion makes development experience much more pleasant and productive. The most common approach is to use Android Studio, Visual Studio Code, or IntelliJ IDEA with Dart and Flutter plugins. And Dartpad is an online code editor for Dart language. In addition to executing regular Dart programs, it can run Flutter programs and show graphic output. Flutter SDK also contains packages and tools for testing, debugging, and profiling apps. A suite of performance and debugging tools called Flutter DevTools is actually written in Flutter. So, where to start with Flutter development? For someone who is already a mobile developer, Flutter documentation contains a great section explaining what are the Flutter equivalents of entities familiar for Android, iOS, React Native, Xamarin, and web developers. I remember this was the first Flutter resource I read when switching from Xamarin background. And for complete newbies, there are great Dart and Flutter videos, code labs, tutorials, and recommended courses. Sounds encouraging to me. Now, I'd like to share a few examples of projects that are using Flutter. Overall, there are already over 200,000 apps using Flutter in the Google Play Store alone, like WeChat, MyBMW, and Grab. A recent mobile developer study shows that Flutter is now the most popular framework for cross-platform development, with 45% of developers selecting it. In the last 30 days, more than 1 in 8 of the new apps in the Play Store are built with Flutter. Within Google, Flutter is used in more than 30 teams and by over 1,000 of engineers. These apps that you see here are already shipping using Flutter. One of the largest apps among them is Google Pay. The product is implemented on 2 platforms, Android and iOS. Launched in over 30 countries, 150 million plus users monthly. It had 2 code bases of total 1.7 million lines. They faced feature disparity because features were implemented at a different rate, and tech debt accumulated twice faster. After weighing pros and cons, they have decided to rewrite everything using Flutter. As a result, they ended up with 35% smaller code base. Engineers became 20% more productive in terms of new features implementation. And the tech debt went down 90% on a per-engineer basis. Because of the rewrite, they were also able to merge all the duplicate release process, experimentation, the launch process, and security reviews. And now, all engineers are working on the same code base, which gives engineering efficiency boost. I am quoting the Vice President of Engineering for Google Pay. If I had to go back, I would absolutely make this decision all over again. And I would recommend it to any team that builds on multiple platforms. Another example is Toyota, the world's biggest selling automaker. Toyota is partnering with Flutter to bring a best-in-market digital experience to vehicles by building infotainment systems powered by Flutter. According to the chief engineer at Toyota Motor North America, Flutter immediately caught their attention for a number of reasons. Flutter's rendering engine provides good performance in a constrained environment, and features like ahead-of-time compilation gives the consistency they've been looking for in an in-vehicle technology. Cross-platform touch mechanics feels right no matter where they run. Flutter developers' experience. Even though they target a single platform, they have leveraged the Flutter's advantage of multi-platform support. Desktop support with hot reload enabled fast development workflow. Support of mobile devices, such as Android and iOS tablets, was useful for all sorts of physical and digital user testing. And the web support improved feedback cycle with product designers. Using Flutter to create a tighter overall feedback in their design and engineering processes. Faster iteration cycles allow to collect and integrate feedback earlier and more often, which helped create the best customer experience. ByteDance, the company behind TikTok, is using Flutter in more than 70 apps. Switching to Flutter has allowed them to ship new apps and features 30% faster. The Flutter development team at BMW Group is one of the world's largest after Google, bringing together a total of 300 employees. At Nubank, they decided to use Flutter as a main technology for mobile development. They found Flutter development experience to be superior, with better hot reload capabilities, very strong official documentation, and a more stable API. Tencent, eBay, Grab, Alibaba Group, the New York Times have apps created with Flutter. You can check the Flutter Dev Showcase section for even more examples of successful Flutter applications. And this was the last topic for today. To recap, we've talked about what is Flutter and how it is special, why it might be worth giving it a chance in your product, how Flutter development is done and where to start, and saw some examples of companies that already use Flutter in production. If you have any doubts about Flutter left, feel free to visit Flutter Dev website, especially the Showcase section. If you are a developer, check out its documentation, code labs, and a guide to getting started, as well as videos and online courses. And if you simply like the cute dash transformations like we saw today, it's called Dashatar, and you can visit Dashatar Dev web app to create your own personalized dash. By the way, that website is implemented in your web framework if you are interested in an example of the quality of web apps that can be created with Flutter. Also, feel free to reach out and connect with me on LinkedIn or Twitter via Anna Domashych handle. Happy fluttering!